Welcome to our next experiment called Forged Carbon with its own twist. Challenges, failures, and disappointments, but ultimately a worthy result. Enjoy watching! First of all, we thoroughly clean it, sand it, polish it, however you prefer. But to be precise, we process it abrasively. That is, we process it with an abrasive, in our case, sandpaper. This operation is done either in order to even out the surface or to create adhesion. Adhesion is the ability of a paint coating to firmly and ensure a strong bond with the surface being painted, in our case, the hood. Simply put, the hood was initially covered with an unclear semi-gloss primer, and with the help of sandpaper, we created conditions for adhesion. And now the applied varnish will definitely adhere to the surface. But first, we remove small imperfections, or more precisely, these little bumps. Then all that's left is to degrease and apply the first layer of varnish, automotive acrylic varnish. In this case, the varnish will act as an adhesive. The choice here is not accidental. We know this material well and understand perfectly how it behaves. And finally, the most interesting part. While the varnish hasn't dried, we apply gold leaf to it. In our case, it's gold colored. I'll say right away, this is our first experience working with this material. But in principle, you can see it in the video. But experience, like impotence, comes with age. And looking ahead, I'll say that Andre has gained it. Well, in terms of gaining experience. And each new piece is placed better and faster. So what is this anyway? Essentially, gold leaf is an imitation of gilding. That is, there is exactly the same material, but it is made of gold. In this case, since monetization is disabled, we use an imitation. It's also metal, but not precious. A super thin sheet of metal alloy that closely resembles gold in color. In the end, we fix this golden layer with a thin layer of varnish. The next step is to work on the lighting. For this, we take fiber optics and cut several hundred rods. What's the idea here? Initially, we wanted to achieve this kind of result, but with some modifications. The thing is, the gold leaf itself glows very well when light hits it, but when there's no light, it's almost invisible. We wanted to solve this problem using fiber optics. How does it work? We gather the fiber optic rods into bundles, which we secure with heat shrink tubing. Then we carefully and securely fix them in this kind of metal ring, which in turn is connected to a lighting system with an RGB controller. But to bring the fiber optics to the front side of the hood, we drill a hole. As a result, all the connections will be neatly placed inside and only the necessary amount of fiber optics will come out. First, we use a thinner drill bit and then we enlarge the hole with a step drill. The next step is to connect the fiber optics to this device, which is specifically designed for these purposes. After an hour of work, 18 bundles have been brought to the front side. Now it remains to spread and secure them across the entire area. According to the plan, the glowing tips of the fiber optics should illuminate the areas where the gold leaf will remain, and we will cover everything else with carbon. For a clear understanding, I'm showing a picture. This is roughly the effect, but the gilded areas should glow even in the dark. At least that's how we envisioned and planned it. But the superglue had other plans. And in the end, after a week of working on the hood, it became clear that the superglue was damaging the fiber optics, and it glowed much less. We conducted a couple more tests and realized that this amount of light would not be enough for us. In the end, everything needs to be redone, studied, and new samples made. By that point, to be honest, the desire to work on it had disappeared. And we are sending this specimen to storage. Until better times. And when something doesn't go according to plan, our trusty old resin always saves the day. Here, we decided to use the hood from the previous episode as a base in which we detailed the entire process. So now, in a few words. Using the mold, we rolled out a similar hood, but this time from fiberglass matte. The only nuance is that we excluded all opaque materials that are usually used in this technology. Specifically, gel coat and primer. Of course, it's a bit more complicated and takes longer, but in this case, it's necessary. Instead of primer, by the way, we used regular glossy varnish. As a result, we indeed got a blank that absolutely perfectly transmits light. But to make the image look unified, the hood, we apply a thin layer of base paint in a gray graphite color, which closely resembles the color of carbon. This layer gives the desired color but still transmits light excellently. That's exactly what needed to be proven. Finally, we move on to the most interesting part, working with carbon. To achieve this effect, it is necessary to use carbon. With such a large checker pattern, in our case, the squares are 27 by 27 millimeters. The next step is to cut several thousand pieces from 3 square meters of carbon. Pieces like these In the end, it took Andre 1.5 weeks. And the very next day, you can start gluing the so-called forged carbon. It is glued with polyester resin, layer by layer, piece by piece. So what exactly is carbon and how is it made? Carbon fibers are made by thermally processing the finest carbon threads, followed by carbonization, which means heating in a nitrogen environment, and graphitization, which means saturating with carbon to increase strength. The carbon fabrics themselves are produced by weaving threads or ribbons. This is neither a quick nor a cheap process. Originally, carbon was developed for sports car manufacturing and aerospace technology, almost like in our case. But thanks to its properties, such as lightweight and high strength, it has become very popular in other industries as well. In aircraft manufacturing, for sports equipment, medical technology, and much more. But in our case, it is still decoration.
The next step is to achieve the most even surface possible, which we will then lacquer, meaning we need to build up the thickness with clear resin, as the carbon fibers were laid chaotically, sometimes overlapping, and in some places there are 3 layers. As a result, all of this has a slightly rough surface, so now we are sanding down any bumps, peaks and some sort, and resining the hood. We apply resin in several layers. And here's another tip. If we find any problematic area, then in the next stage of resining the hood, we can confidently cover it with a new slice of carbon and resin it more. And that's it. We sand with coarse sandpaper, 120 grit, without hesitation.
As Andre said, so it was done.
We sanded the hood, but you need to feel the fine line to avoid sanding through the carbon. That is, we leave any large craters. because there's no point in sanding them. It will sand through here. We control everything using a degreaser, meaning a matte surface, nothing is visible. We spray with a degreaser. And in this way, we catch the moment when it's time to stop. We mix another batch of resin and we pour it over the entire hood. Initially, we glued the carbon flakes with polyester resin, creating a lens effect. We finish it off with regular epoxy casting resin. And an important rule, epoxy. It adheres to polyester, but polyester does not adhere to epoxy. We pour it like from a cup and spread it. I will do all this with a soft spatula.
In the end, Andrei coated the hood with several layers of varnish and left it to dry. Meanwhile, we focused on the last element, specifically the lighting. As you remember, our hood is made of fiberglass mat and it lets light through. The pieces of carbon are arranged in such a way that there are gaps between them, which will light up. And to make them light up, Lesha is laying out dozens of meters of addressable LED strip. As you understood, this is exactly the same setup we used in the previous video with the glowing hood. Everything is explained in detail there. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. In the end, we joined the two parts of the hood, placed it on the car, and got this result. Be sure to write your opinion on how you like this tuning. Join our Telegram channel and participate in the giveaway. Thank you for watching and wishing you well from the Axe.